Hi guys and welcome back. Today I am working on this painting that is pretty much dedicated to my favorite weather, which is slightly chilly, rainy weather. I've been thinking about this a lot lately actually. I've been wanting to create paintings that have moods and feelings that I love. And that's what today is. It's a bit of an experiment because while I love rain and I love watercolors, I haven't really figured out or painted or practiced it a lot, but I haven't really figured out how I want to paint stormy clouds yet. So that's what today is. It's me practicing and testing it out. So I have some tips and tricks that I learned, things that I definitely did wrong, but also things that I think worked pretty well. So yeah, today I'm going to talk a bit about what I learned in this quest for a rainy type of a texture for the sky. And after that, I'll talk a bit about the rest of the painting. But yeah, to begin, I knew that I wanted this to be a wet on wet technique for the background. So from the very start, I did my line work like I normally do. And then I went in with my masking fluid to take care of the figure and her umbrella and everything so that when I'm painting the background, I can get really expressive with the watercolors and let it flow around. And I would not have to worry about very carefully going around the figure or tipping over my canvas and then getting paint on top of where it shouldn't be. So this masking fluid was incredibly helpful for especially this kind of a technique, but really pretty much any kind of background, foreground type thing. This works really well. I found that I get a lot better results when I take the time to use a masking layer. So towards the beginning, I show a couple test runs with the background, and I think this is kind of my biggest takeaway, or maybe one of the things that I really need to work on the most, is that I actually found that my little test samples of how I wanted to paint the clouds, I was happier with the flow that I got with the colors on those than I was with the actual finished painting. So I need to find what that disconnect is between the two. And I think I have a couple ideas, but I'll talk about that a little bit more when I'm actually getting to painting the full painting. But yeah, doing these test runs was really, really helpful. The biggest thing that it helped me do was it helped me figure out where I wanted to lay the values. And this is a thing that I tend to lose my grip on when I'm doing these very free-flowing textures and watercolors. I'll just put things down and I won't really pay attention to where the darks are and the lights are and how I can preserve that. And that's what I really wanted to make sure I was figuring out today. So I wanted the bottom of the painting to be lighter and the top to be darker where the clouds were. I also wanted the border between the two to be very hazy and soft. And I knew that I wanted there to be a certain break in the middle of the painting at the top as well. So there would be this peak of a lighter value coming up between the darker clouds. And I thought that that would add a little bit more interest rather than being straight from dark to lighter watercolor or clouds. And even just having that really simple, basic plan of attack on where I was going to keep my darks and where I was going to avoid it and just let the watercolors blend into each other naturally, that helped so much. I think that was a huge improvement from some of my past attempts at getting something like this, where oftentimes in the past I would get a very homogenized texture, so everything would just blend together and become one value. And I'm just much, much happier with this process, with having lights and darks and much more of a shape language to the background itself. So I might have mentioned this already, but I knew that I wanted to get this look with a wet on wet technique, which I'm not as comfortable with yet as I am with wet on dry, because I do most of my stuff wet on dry. But wet on wet, it allows the watercolors to really play to its strength, I guess you could say, where it will mix and mingle. And in my little sample tests, or my test runs of this background, I went in and I added a lot of color and a lot of water, and then I tilted it up so that the pigment would stream down through the water and it would create this really hazy, nice blend. And I loved the look of that. And that's something that I didn't quite achieve as well when it came to the finished product. I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think the biggest one is that because I was working on a larger piece of paper, it was drying out faster, and Also, I think I wasn't putting as much water to paper ratio as I was with the smaller piece. So I think I was a little bit more timid with how much I was putting down. And another thing that I think affected it is that in that test run, it was just paint on paper, but in the final, I had this figure and her umbrella, which was basically bisecting this piece, which meant instead of being able to have this free flow from the top to the bottom, I had to go in there and manually bring down certain colors below the umbrella so that it would have this continuation, which I don't know if I think it would have been good to have thought about that when I was doing the tests, but I think the technique was mostly okay, if that makes sense. I was definitely going to have her there. I just needed to find a way to make sure that it continued downward. But I do think that having that break there, I didn't quite achieve the same level of flow from the colors, from the darker values to the lighter values. So I think maybe something that could have solved that is I could have gone in and filled in the entire figure with masking fluid. And that would have allowed me to just completely flood the paper and let it drip all the way down. Whereas the way that I did it here, I had to make sure that it wasn't running too far over the character. I had to make sure that the paint was running up on the top side of her. And then again, I'd have to manually go back in with a brush and drop it down below her. So I think that's probably something in the future. If I did something like this, I would just take the extra time as well as the extra masking fluid and just fill her in entirely. I think I would have gotten a better result as far as having this wet on wet technique. And I think the last thing that I'd really like to make sure that I focus on in the future when I do a stormy blend with nice texture like this is that I want to make sure that when I'm doing subsequent layers, which I did a couple layers to build up the depth and the texture, is I need to make sure that I'm still keeping that wet on wet technique. So as I added more layers, I was a little bit less careful of making sure that the paper was really wet and that things were really blended. I started to go into so that it was a little bit more dry when I was applying the paint. And that meant that I got a lot more hard lines in my paint rather than really, really soft blends. So I think that would have been a pretty big improvement actually from the disconnect between how much I really liked those little test runs and how I felt like that softness was lost in the final. So I think I just need to be a little bit more aware and pay more attention to keeping it a wet on wet technique throughout the entire process, if that's what I want, if that's the look that I'm wishing that I could achieve. And I kept the colors pretty narrow when it came time to color choice. I, of course, looked up a lot of references for stormy weather for the background, and I wanted it to be very gray and really monochromatic. I actually ended up using a variety of gray pigments that I had, so most of it, or maybe I'd say 50% of the background was Payne's Gray, and the brand for that was M-Gram. And I also used Hematite Genuine and Moonglow from Daniel Smith, which were amazing for this application because they're both very granulating, which means they would break apart and separate, and it got this really nice stormy weather kind of a texture. So those were really great. I also used a little bit of a magenta color in the background, and that I tied into her skin. So her skin really was pretty much predominantly that magenta color. And then I also had very similar colors in her hair. I did it as a Payne's Gray and then a final wash with that magenta over top. And then I had yellow in her rain jacket and her umbrella. And I think that popped really nicely off of the background, which is a really kind of a rich, cool blue, cool blue-gray, I should say. So I actually really love the contrast of having the really bright, warm clothes that she was wearing against this really stormy, dark, monochromatic, desaturated background. And the strong cast shadow from the umbrella onto her face and then a little bit onto her coat, that was one of my favorite details. I did actually kind of drop the ball on that one until I was about halfway done when I was getting to her face, and then I realized I did actually want a pretty strong shadow being cast from that umbrella to create this really strong shape and a little bit more of a dynamic lighting situation. And yeah, after I added that onto her face, I went back in and added that cast shadow back onto her coat, and I really loved the look of it. I found that it was really transformative for this piece. I could have implemented it better if I was paying attention to it better from the beginning and making sure that I was getting a very accurate shape, but that's okay. I'm glad I got it in there and didn't make it to the end and then wish that I had incorporated this really strong shadow. And I'm also really happy with the way that these strands of hair changed the composition. I felt like it really grounded her out, and it made a lot more interest happen with this painting, where before I added that, I was feeling really kind of on the fence with this one. I wasn't really sure if I liked it. I was feeling kind of frustrated with some of the hair details. So once I transformed that into more of these like locks of hair that are wet but also spread out, and broke the border of the painting specifically, I felt like that's when I really liked this painting, when it changed to something that I enjoyed, and I felt like I was doing something new and different with it for myself. And that is it for today. I do have this original painting available at my shop. There's a link down in the description that'll take you over there. I also have links to my Twitch page where you can come and live stream with me while I paint and chit chat with you guys. I also have a link to my Patreon, which is a great way to help support me and this channel and the art that I do. So I want to give a huge thank you to anyone who helps support this channel by any means. But that is about it for today. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will be back next week with another video. So I'll see you then.